Afrikaans gehou. Maar ek het nooit die waarde gesien in dit nie. Om het te studie, om het te leer, je kan het study by die university. Net toe ek by die university kom, toe besef ek hoe belangrijk het is. That language is central to who you are. It's central to your identity. So in undergraduate studies, when I got to university, I studied linguistics, Afrikaans and Dutch, and English. And this is where I think the trouble with my identity started. So, when you go to university, you aspire to be like your professor, speak like a professor, articulate yourself like a professor. So when I started majoring in Afrikaans and Dutch, my speech started switching to a standard academic language. So, ja, nee, hoe gaan dit vandag? So I used to go home and people would look strange to me like, hoe praat jy nou? Jy is nie van die lewes.
Yeah.
But gradually, as I moved from undergraduate, and in Afrikaans and Dutch, I also learned how to speak Dutch, So if I go today to the airport, if I arrive in Amsterdam or if I arrive in Belgium, if the passport controller asks me in Dutch, wat doet je hier in België? En dan zeg ik ben de Zuid-Afrikaner, en ik verstond een kleine beetje Nederlands, niet zo vaak, meaning I understand a little bit of Dutch. So I can read, and so that's where I learned, because my lecturer, Abraham de Vries, spoke Dutch the very first day. Because we speak a language that says 99% of the Dutch vocabulary. And that's where I started to understand the importance of language and its link to identity. So at one point, I remember undergraduate, my final year undergraduate studies, I switched back into CAPS and spoke to my professors in the following way. Ja, maar professor, wat means jy met die? So he, was taken aback. Most of them were taken aback because you're supposed to articulate yourself in the best Afrikaans that you know. So for me, I was a twice personal transition in understanding the importance of language and identity, where you are situated. At undergraduate level, that is what I was introduced to. But at postgraduate level, I started to think about the important empowerment issues that speakers of CAPS and Afrikaans have to deal with on a daily basis. And that's where I came back to understand and study what hip-hop artists are doing with language. And I started doing a PhD in hip-hop, or focusing on hip-hop and language. And this is how it happened. Now, I'm a fan of hip-hop. I was introduced to hip-hop. I cannot spit a 16 bars in a freestyle. I tried to once. I got murdered on the spot. So, yeah, I will never try that ever again. Although I do silently, try to memorize the rhymes. I was walking on campus and there was a poster that said "Stepping Stones to Hip Hop, Clubstones, Kales River." Oh, okay, so I asked the dude standing there putting up the poster, "Kyk hier, what is this?" And then he explained, "No, we're starting a hip hop show." Now the important thing of me meeting this person, this is Marvin Levendal from Mobcow. At that particular point in time, there was no studies done on hip-hop and language in the way that hip-hop, the younger generation now, are using language to link it to identity and society and changing the genre in CAPS and Afrikaans. So that first day, he told me, come with us to what they called then the Menace Mansion, which was just a house, where they did, created the beats. But they named it the Menace Mansion after, Hugh Hefner's Playboy Mansion, right? So that's the interesting link.
No bunnies though.
No. That, and from there, everything just completely changed because I actually stayed over sometimes. I documented everything. From the morning till the afternoon. I was there in the studio and I was recording everything to document the lifestyle of the hip-hop artist and the use of language. So for me, I not only studied them, but also made friends with him, and it completely changed the way that I understand the hip hop culture, how I understand language and multilingualism. And since then, I've tried to teach others how to look at, not only the hip hop culture in Cape Town, but also speakers of Kaps and Afrikaans. That many speakers are completely misunderstood because we try to impose a particular idea of language on them, and that we should never do that.
That actually takes me to my first question. Actually, my second question. How does this work, this body of work, how will it affect the youth, in particular?
Yes, you're talking specifically about the dictionary project, or
Yes.
This is a very important question that you are asking, and we talk about this all the time in the project. If you think about the empowerment of lighties on the Cape Flats who speak Kaps and Afrikaans, look, the first languages that they meet are Kaap, or that they learn to speak, is the variety Kaps that they speak, that they learn in their home, and then a version of their English, whether they get that version through WWE on TV or via their mother and father. And that's why you have some of these rappers having rah-rah, sort of.
Like
The R is too high. They give a bottle of water, not a bottle of water, you need to flatten water. They need to flatten the vowels. Those are the first two, and then the language of the number gangs. Sabela. This is 26s, 27s, and 28s. It's an unavoidable fact that in your environment, as a Cape Flats Kaap speaker, not to pick up Sabela. Horse is not a Kaap's word. It comes from the number gangs, right? So what most people then outside our communities misunderstand is that we speak a gangster language, because it just so happens that those languages, or the number gangs language, comes into what we call your repertoire. That is your total store of languages and styles of speaking that you as an individual develop over your life span. Now, we need to get rid of that understanding, because what is actually happening is that you are becoming multilingual even before you go to school. Because when you get to school, the languages that you are taught in is standard Afrikaans and standard English. And that, for many studies have shown, for many kids who go to school, is like learning a foreign language, because now you have to write in something that you don't speak at home. Now, the empowerment question in helping speakers, the young speakers especially on the Cape Flats and beyond, the empowerment issue concerns developing this language into a language of teaching and learning. And if it's developed into a language of teaching and learning, it can be used in the economy. It can be used in politics. The news can be read in Kaaps, because we have materials, and that's a very important product and materials that we don't have at this very point in time. If we take that step, what it means is that Kaaps and Afrikaans can decontextualize abstract knowledge such as mathematics. You can use Kaaps to talk about mathematics. Wow. You can teach Kaaps, Afrikaans, to teach and learn about economics. And you can teach also history. Now, this dictionary project, and I think whether people like it or not, it's actually taking the first step towards that. The very real first step towards that.
My derde vraag wat ek wil vra het, né?
Yeah.
But it's brilliant, dude. It's brilliant.
Yeah. So here's the questions that people have been asking is, okay, so how do we change that? How do we change the curriculum in school? So what you need to do is to translate materials from either Afrikaans or English into Kaaps. And the way that you do that is to consult a dictionary, which we are doing, and a grammar book. But this is a sticky point, because if you develop a grammar book, what you mean to suggest to Kaap speakers is that we are going to tell you that this is the way that you write certain words in a sentence. Now, we don't want to do that really, because we don't want to exclude other ways of speaking Kaap's and Afrikaans. But the grammar book is extremely important because the anchors at E! News or SABC will use it to write the bulletins in Kaap's. Now, you see, we are in an important transition period because when people see Kaap's being spoken on TV or Afrikaans, it's usually laughed at because it's an informal language. No, it's a dialect. It's not a language. Those colours or those speakers who speak Kaap's, they just use it for everyday communication. Why should we take it serious? And that has to do with the functions. Meaning, if you use Kaap's in just informal conversation, the function, that's the function, just to have a conversation. But the moment you use it in class to actually transfer knowledge, such as mathematics and economics and history, now we have elevated it to a higher level. Now you can't ignore it because knowledge is being developed in your brain and it's being stored there. And then at a later stage, you can debate in mathematics, but in Kaap's, through Kaap's. And that's what we mean by elevating the functions of Kaap's. So that we can get rid of the stereotype. It is a language of, spoken by gangsters. When they speak, you can laugh at it. One time, I give you an example. I was waiting on the radio to be patched in to a conference that was live, and one of the panelists said, she was a teacher. She said she just loves the way her kids speaks in Kaap's. It's just so nice on the ears, and it's this alternative way of speaking. So it's still a dialect. It can't be seen as a language, and therefore we can't elevate it. That would be her argument. So we don't need to think about empowering them. So my argument that I'm making is that if you say Kaap's in Afrikaans is a dialect, a variety of something else, all talk about empowering our youth, transforming the economy so that they can get jobs where they can use Kaap's, write in Kaap's, job cards in a factory. All talk about that stops. But if it's a language that is a system of signs, that science is non-verbal, meaning you can sign with your hands, and verbal, you speak it, and it's used by a community because it's rule governed, meaning it can be written in a sentence. If we say it's a language, now we can talk about transforming the curriculum, transforming the economy. Because the majority of our speakers are working class speakers. Their way out of the Cape Flats is not through standard Afrikaans, it's through English. That's why you see a lot of parents making choices saying, ek gaan my laaitie in 'n Engelse skool sit, because ek weet, hy laaitie gaan vaar word by EWK, of by UCT, of waar else hulle Engels. So ek gee hulle die beste kans om te survive. Want ek het dit gehad, so hulle gaan miskien kry. If we give them this additional choice of choosing Kaap's, you not only sustain where they come from, it also helps their spirit and affirms their identity. Sorry, I just baie lang question.
No, it's brilliant. Baie van my vrae wat ek wil, dan mag ek dit weer vra.
Vra weer, ja, that's right.
Kijk, what the point I want to make here is that quite strangely enough, has always been seen as a dialect, always been like derogatory in its description of us as the so-called colored people.
Yeah.
Yet, what the history books fail to tell is that this has been in development since the 1500s.
Absolutely.
So, historically, Kaap's predates Afrikaans because Afrikaans was only adopted as an official language in 1925.
Yeah.
So how the hell is a dialect that has been used and which a lot of the words are contained within the Ha'atir? How is it that they can utilize our words and our way of speaking? Because otherwise they as the Afrikaner, which is another thing they appropriated from colored people, they should have been speaking Dutch or Flemish or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
So Afrikaans cannot be seen. Afrikaans is a dialect of Kaap's. And that is a very uncomfortable
absolutely
conversation that they're not willing to have. But unfortunately, yes, we are going to be partnering with a lot of these bodies. But the fact of the matter is, legitimacy, historically, there is empirical proof that Kaaps predated Afrikaans.
Absolutely. This is this is a very important point that you are making, and I think many agree with that fact, and it's a fact that it does predate. I was making the joke on Facebook the other day, saying that the distance between Makassar Beach and Batavia Road in Reiterweg is less than Makassar Beach or island in Indonesia and Batavia, in the old Batavia in Jakarta today. That tells you something, that the historical significance of the speakers that brought some of the words here, that does predate the formation of Afrikaans. Now, here's what's very important to understand this. In the Afrikaans documentary, we talk about the Creole history of Afrikaans, right? And decontextualizing that. And that has brought us up to this actual point.
Yeah.
Which we have irrefutable proof. Like, for example, the word Subat is not an Afrikaans word. It's also not a Dutch word. It's a word that was brought here with slaves, that was taken by the Dutch here, and they met as they came along the coast here in conversation or bartering with Harry the Strandloper or Achamoa.
Ochamoa,
And they taught Achamoa, because he was the interpreter for his clan, the word Subat, which means friends in Old Javanese, that was taken from Batavia. But the Dutch took it up and transformed it, and so Subat means is to beg for something. But its original root meaning means friend. And the same goes for the word aware. Now we use it as a greeting word, but I want to make a point with these examples. The root word of aware is where, and in Old Javanese it means to give. Now here's the assumption, because we don't have proof for it, but we know this because this is from the dictionaries of Old Javanese, which I have. If you are a Dutch trader and you want to refresh, and so you need to talk to Harry the Strandloper, ask him for some sort of meat, because you need to refresh. So I would say with my Indonesia or Jakartian interpreter or slave, to tell Harry the Strandloper, tell him I said here. So my slave would say, Sekil, where? Sekil, where? This is what we call a pidgin. So at that particular moment, a pidgin is just used. It's not a lingua franca, meaning a language a common language that we have or understand, like English and Afrikaans. But it's just a small, simplistic phrases that we use to amongst each other, that we either pick up and use in communication. And that pidgin then, as the enslaved was brought here by the Dutch, gradually developed into a Creole. Now, at that point, at the Cape, there were about equal amount of percentage of, this is the late 1500s, going into the 1600s, there were about, and even the late 1600s, there were about the same percentage of slaves from Madagascar, from Indonesia, that is Batavia, from the Congo region, and they all came with their different languages and versions of Dutch. That's why from India, for example, there were slaves as well that came to Cape Town, but it was then known as Cap de Boa Esperanza, the Cape of Good Hope, because that indicates that the Portuguese was here, right? And because Saldanha Bay, there's also Saldanha Bay in Portugal, near Lisbon. So that there's also another link. So they brought all those languages here, but it was the enslaved that truly spoke these early form that wasn't standardized, that wasn't given a dictionary, that wasn't given a grammar. So and remained marginalized. But it's a contested history because everybody wants to have that origin story.
Yeah.
The Kitab Holland speakers, those were the Malay speakers in Bokab, who set down Afrikaans in phonetic Arabic script. They also want to claim that history. And that's, I think for me and for us, we've talked about this, that's okay. Because what it does is that you recognize the complex origins of language use at the Cape. But we can't stay in the past all the time. We can go there to confirm our position. But what matters today is to allow the speakers of Kaap's and Afrikaans to exercise their agency. That is to bring about institutional change, that they can feel they are worth something in this world. But also so that they can have a voice, that is to make themselves heard, right? If we don't give that to them, they don't feel that they have pride in the language, right? And so we need to ensure that the pride in the language are sustained through various activities in our school systems and university systems. And it will really take the village of us to transform. But the few of us are working hard to set it up, for the many.
No, so I just want to say, like, a valuable source or font of information has always been, for me personally, with the passing of Dr. Neville Alexander, I think the person has been keeping the history alive and has been pushing it currently, like, with the establishment of the Kamisa Museum. Patrick Tariq Malay, he's a valuable font. He's like, for me, he's a national treasure in terms of being able to trace genealogy, language, everything, the influences of various cultures that makes up the colored construct. Because all we know that the term colored contains so much more. It was much easier for the national government to lump us all together. But you can basically break down where the different tributaries come from, where the different slaves came from, the crewmen, free slaves, the free sailors, etc. All the people that came to make us up to be who we are. And that's one argument that's always been put forward when it comes to social media arguments, tribal arguments, is that we are not seen to be as a people without we don't have a culture. Yet the culture that binds us is first and foremost the language. There's a shared, because history has a way of being phased out. If it's not in the media, it's going to get forgotten. The spoken word is not always recalled as accurately as possible. It's like the broken telephone. But we do have various people in our communities that continue, that have the sources of information that's available. I mean, I think Patrick published a book called The Lie of 1652.
The Lie of 1652, brilliant.
Which is a brilliant piece of work. I've yet to read it though, but because I know, based on the veracity of his posts and the detail that goes into that, it's like nobody can debunk him, but yet it happens a lot coming from not just academia, but like the media, the people that's in the newspapers that's debunking it's like a bunch of rubbish, or they try to, always want to throw salt on.
To try to cancel him. To
cancel this. And I foresee certain salt. Yes, we in the media a lot now. Between Professor Williams and Professor Adam Opt, myself have been in the media in terms of interviews over the past 2 months. And yes, it might die down again, but the thing is, this dictionary is going to be, I think we aim to have the first rough version like within 2 years online. And then by the end of the 5-year project to have a published work. But it's going to be continuously evolving because the standard dictionary will be there. There'll be a children's dictionary. There'll be a version for academia. But a lot of this will be able to be accessed online, free of charge. The difference in what we're producing for the betterment of the people and those that are currently publishing dictionaries, and this is, I'm not sure if it's a global standard or how things are usually done, as there's usually a fee charged. And it's not something that's easily accessible or obtainable to the man on the street. I mean, I think the one dictionary you referred to costs like 700 to 800 rand.
This is the higher tier, yes.
That's the higher tier. So, I mean, who's going to have 800 rand? I'm going to take 800 rand and say, my broer,
That's on your cost.
That's a halve skaap.
Yeah.
Hy's hoeveel kuste biere.
Yeah.
And I'm not that I'm saying, but that is the reality on the Cape Flats. It's like,
absolutely.
if you're looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's like you are literally looking at shelter, food, security. That is your base level. That's what you're worrying about, and that's what people are scattling for. So the economy is in a doldrums in terms of what people are allowed to access. And if you're only getting a SASA grant, what is it that you can do with that? Are you going to be worried about higher education? But if that resource is free, and it's something that's going to empower you and make you be able to go to that job at Pick and Pay where you don't have to speak or write that perfect English or Afrikaans.
Right.
You can, in fact, empower yourself by being able to speak the way you speak, report the way you have to report.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, that's a major thing.
Yeah, I want to speak on the academic part, especially in not only celebrating Neville Alexander, but one point I want to make is also that there's an assumption that all of our people or speakers of Kaap and Afrikaans clearly understand standard Afrikaans. They do, many can, but in situations where you have to translate, like prescriptions for pills, or instructions on a bag that might poison you, in cases like that, language become extremely important.
Yeah.
Now, Patrick has done brilliant work. People need to engage with him. And Neville Alexander has always been at, in situations where he had to sort of really assert his position. But what it does, and I think this is what I want to highlight, it points to the work of academics, linguists who have worked on Afrikaans and Kaaps and Afrikaans during apartheid, and even before that. The important thing why I'm pointing this out, and I sort of am of the assumption that what they've published, what they did during apartheid, for example, sustained a particular idea of language that we cannot apply to speakers of Kaaps and Afrikaans. So in other words, there's this hierarchy, and the most purest form is standard Afrikaans.
Yeah.
And the most lowest form is a pidgin or a vernacular or Creole idea. And so coming back to what I mentioned to Nantal is elevating the functions of language. But the biggest obstacle still is academia, because most linguists, especially those working on Afrikaans, feel that their body of knowledge that they built up for years since apartheid is standard knowledge that it cannot be questioned. Now, I always say this, that our argument should be that Kaaps and Afrikaans happens to say the grammar and the vocabulary of Afrikaans. It happens to say it's not almost quite the same like it is. They had, for example, a competition or a calling on SAFM for speakers to provide Afrikaans words, because we are developing the first trilingual dictionary of Kaaps. They branded it wrong, but they should have said people should submit Kaaps words. And so every time a caller called in, they submitted Afrikaans, standard like Afrikaans words. And words that are specific to their experience as Afrikaans speakers. So academia, linguists in South Africa, they need to break away from this what I call apartheid linguistics, this body of knowledge that seems to sustain a particular idea of the speaker. What do I mean? Most linguists today, or social linguists, if they wanted to describe the English usage of colored speakers on the Cape Flats, they would say those speakers speak Cape Flats English or Cape Colored English. Now we know there's a huge problem with the notion colored, right? So how can you say those speakers speak Cape Colored English and just take it at its face value? How can you say that those speakers speak Cape Flats English just because they are located in the Cape Flats? I mean, you could have been isolated in a room and watch WWE all your small life and come out with an American accent, and say, "Mommy, can I have a bottle of water?" With your New York accent, or just listen to Notorious B.I.G. and just that, and you could imitate that particular speech form, and live in Bisablevers somewhere, And, you know what I'm saying? So, shout out to Bishop Lavis, So I think our idea and I'm particularly focusing on those two varieties, those two labels, because many of the researchers who described Cape Colored English, Cape Flats English, they were based in UCT at the speech therapy department, and they studied in the 90s, early 90s to the late, 1980s to the late 1980s, speakers in a hospital, day hospital in Bonteheuwel and in Mitchell's Plain. Now, if you are working as a linguist in apartheid times and you are white, you are the most privileged person, and the speaker who is colored are far less privileged because they can't move to Rondebosch and stay there for long hours. You know this with the hip hop culture that moved into the city and sort of transgressively taken over it for a particular period.
Yeah.
So,
and then systematically being worked out.
Exactly. So my argument always is that is a hard fact to swallow for social linguistics or linguistics as a field. So you need to atone for those apartheid linguistic sins. You have to move away from that knowledge. Otherwise, you will still look at the colored speaker saying, that speaker, if I hear that particular vowel, or if I hear that particular sentence construct, they speak Cape Colored English or Cape Flats English, and I can then locate it. We need to move away from that.
I want to ask you, how do you guys get to the spelling of the words? Like say aware is A-W-E,
Yeah.
soms is there, soms zit 'n H by.
Yes.
But soms I'll say that as O, as I'm in O.
Yeah.
So how do you hoe settle julle op a spelling of a word?
That's a very good question. And
Lexicography 101.
there we go. So we recently, and I can say this, we had an exercise. So what you usually do is, one way to do it is you can go to the speaker and ask the speaker what word they use to greet. And in our case, it will be aware. And then you say, okay, can you spell that for me? And then if that person tells you, okay, it's spelled like this, and the next person says the same, and the next, in one community, let's say over 1,000, then you've reached what we call data saturation. So enough people have said it in the same way that allows you to convince you that this is how they use it amongst those group of speakers. But and if others says aware without the H, that's also correct. That's also true. That's part of a process of what we call introspection. And Shaquille knows this because that's the first methodology that he implemented. The other one is building a data source, a corpus of published texts. So let's say you take all the works of Adam Small, Nathan Chantal, Andre Chantal, and Ronaldo Comfort, just those four. They've written a lot in Kaap's and about the experiences of Kaap speakers. So you take the PDFs and you convert it into texts, and then from those texts you feed it into a software called Wordsmith Tools that will tell you which of the words occur in all of those texts, let's say 20 of them, which of the words occur most, and which of the words occur least. Let's say the word aware occur 17th time the most out of 50,000 words. And so and then let's say the word subat occurs once across all those texts. So what do we then do is we take it out, those words, and then that's the data source for how we spell the word. So we know that Nathan spells aware like that, but aware is not in Adam Small because maybe it's because of for some other reason in the dialogue of the text. So both spelling of aware and other forms are correct because we use it on a daily basis. It's a reflection, an accurate reflection of how the speaker uses the word. And a different example, because that's a sort of a noun. A different example is the contraction that is a preposition phrase. So it's preposition phrase is when you put something in the box, in the box. So the preposition is in that case. But for us, it's unny because it's a contraction, right? Now you can spell Ini as I-N-I. Sakil spells it like that. I spell it as I-N-N-I. But you might spell it as I-N-N-I-E.
Yeah, I spell it like
That's
that.
exactly.
I didn't mix it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, he's on a different level, you know. It's he always puts me on the wrong foot here. It's like, my foot dang op die man, you know, as in obvious. But all of those words are correct. Now, and we include all of those ways of spelling it because it's important to accurately reflect the lived experiences of the Kaap speakers in the way that they use Kaaps. And so our dictionary then gives you the word, then we give you, what type of part of speech it is, whether it's a noun, an adverb, an adjective, and then we describe the meaning of the word, and then illustrate it in sentences. That's either in our collection of texts or it's taken from other types of experiences. So in the exercise that we did, I stuck to the corpus, to the data, and Sakil did introspection. And so his were more diverse than what mine is because I looked at the Bible and Kaaps. So there's Olivia Katsias, she's part of our local advisory board. She has begun to translate the Bible into Kaaps. So
I can imagine the backlash for that.
Yeah. So my first word was Yere, which was the I think it was the singular. No, it was the plural to Yer. And then I illustrated it, the very different meanings because you can say die Here het my gesave, or you could say Yer as a way to express anger. Use the Lord's name in vain there. But Sakil, his first word was chachis.
No, it wasn't my first word. I think it was
one of the first words. Yeah. What was the first word?
First word was masjid.
Masjid. You see, so it's also a religious take, but differently. But he had chachis there as well. And now a Kaap speaker knows about chachis. When the chachis is all right, there's an album, a jazz album, I think, but it refers to Manenberg. So that's extremely unique, right? And so I don't even know the sentence that you illustrated with, but that's how we.
I think it was. My broers got chachis to the weekend.
Yeah, exactly. What we are doing differently than the Ha'at here or the Woordeboek van die Afrikaanse taal is that we are not only focusing on one data source like text, written text. We are focusing on introspection, meaning what you as the speaker know you use, the words you use on a daily basis. So we are diversifying all our sources from where the language comes from and how the language is used. So that's why I was asking rappers, for example, and hip-hop artists, send me your lyrics and your music. I want to celebrate you, give you your flowers, because when the Lighty picks up this dictionary tomorrow and he sees the word horse in the dictionary and it's in Cola's album, Eight Up a Deal, I mean, come on, how big of a shout out can that be, right?
I think also to a large extent, like we're moving along with technology as well. So like the archaic form, which is yes, we will have printed versions of the book. But also to have it as an online resource where those hyperlinks can be inserted into those, because otherwise imagine trying to say like, horse has got how many sources that we've referenced now. It comes from this book, was used over there, in this album, in this television production. Yet now we can attach hyperlinks. So like if we're saying this word comes from Four Corners, so this word comes from Numeskoli, or whatever the case may be, or from this person's album, then we can link it, and then also in the same way giving legitimacy to those works, published works, registered works, and in that same sense necessarily empowering the actual artist to whoever's used it.
Absolutely. And so we you mentioned scripts, we've received scripts as well
from the majority of the all major plays that have been happening in South Africa. We received all the books in 1 week from all the publishers, all the published works in Kaaps. And that's an amazing response, we have the script Barakat. We have the reel van hip hop. That's Siham. Shout out to Siham. Her Rolodex is like this thick. She's been a great help in putting us into contact with people that's not in our communication sphere. But that's what we are doing differently from, I guess, other dictionaries. Is
to focus on all these multiple sources to give an accurate description. Now, if you go, and I think this will be the case, if you go to, if eventually you go to the online platform and you see the word away or horse, and it's like 2 pages long, what it just means is that this word is used in so many contexts, has so many different meanings, because you can say away as a greeting word, you say away with a question mark, away. You know, the inflection on the tone it suggests different meanings, you know.
You know, another word wat ons doen is hallo. Het kan 'n greet wees,
Ja.
het kan 'n warning wees.
Yeah, hello.
Hallo.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's I don't see the other language it's
Away.
a
No.
greet wat so kan.
Yeah, that is culturally significant to Kaap speakers.
Yeah, in plus like away can mean that you agree ook. Like,
Yeah.
yours check it's a klare kos gemaak al, away.
Yeah,
Like-
exactly. It has very different meanings. Now, this is the groundbreaking thing about doing this work. It has never been done.
And
And for-
nuance in it. That's by
exactly, and we will try to capture those nuances and of those meanings, but we will make mistakes too, and it's up to the community to correct us. We'll say like, "Nee man, jy het nie daai woord ge-include nie. Hoekom wil jy nie daai woord include nie?" So that's what we will do, and that's what makes it so groundbreaking for this
That's dope,
for this work, you know.
Yeah, I just want to send a shout out to the guy who's been giving our lexicography training, Professor Tapelo
Otlagetse.
Getswe. Yeah, he's from the University of Botswana.
From the University of Botswana, yes.
And yeah, the work he's been doing thus far with us has been
Amazing.
and it's
Yeah.
been eye-opening. Especially his, I think he was the one who gave us the idea for the various sources, especially going
Absolutely.
into communities and doing voice recordings of certain, like if it's going to be a church gathering, if it's going to be a soccer match,
Yeah.
if it's going to be a yard party.
Yeah, all of that.
We want to be there. The community compilers will be going out and getting those actual physical recordings, which can be used as a reference in the digital dictionary as
Absolutely, yeah. Now so he's teaching us how to do it, and that's part of the methodology. And one of the next steps that we have to do is go out into the community and actually ask them what are the words that they use. And we already have a set questionnaire for it. And that questionnaire allows us, you know, what is the word for elbow, and you know what is the word for D? Is it bina or is it wat bina? You know what I'm saying?
Light.
Yeah. So we need to capture all of that, and I think once we do that, that will be the first step. Now, a lot of people, and Sakil mentioned this, ask how long will it take. We are conservative because it does take a while with the current personnel that we have. But in that time, we can already open up the CAPS curriculum a little bit and make this language a language of teaching and learning. Train the students to teach this language. And by the way, a lot of these kids who come from the Cape Flats to UWC, for example, who study linguistics, in my classes, for example, they all speak Afrikaans. So it would be nothing for them to switch back to the thing that they do the most and the best on a daily basis.
Second nature.
Exactly. And so they just need to have the material to teach it. And I think that's the important transition that we have to make. We need to adapt our curricula and not transform it, because I think, or change it. A lot of people are scared when I say change it, meaning you have to throw it away. We are not here to replace you. This is not a great replacement. This is empowerment. So we want you to adapt and to include CAPS. Draw on the kids in your classroom who are CAPS speakers, especially if you are a teacher. Learn from them, and if you do that, you will really increase their confidence. Because let's face it, they are not, if we are talking about mother tongue education, they are not learning their mother tongue. They are learning a foreign language, standard Afrikaans, you know.
Yeah.
So it's extremely important.
So by when do you think, realistically, conservatively, by when will
The dictionary be complete?
no, not complete, but when will the
Will it be available?
when will this be taught basically in classes? And
That's several things need to happen. If the basic education department says, for example, okay, we will pay attention to Kaap speakers, transform it into a language and teaching and learning. What they need to do is invest taxpayers' money because it's our money. You know, so what we are doing is with taxpayers' money. So and
Partially.
partially, yes.
Yeah.
So we're working very hard, full time for less of the money, right? So what they need to do is there are some plans afoot, and I can't talk about it because it's not public yet. But what they need to do is invest. They can either establish a center for the advancement of Kaaps, then train teachers at university. In other words, open up the curriculum and train teachers. All these undergraduate students who want to go teach, they can then go do their postgraduate certificate in education with a module on Kaaps, pedagogy, how to teach Kaaps, Kaaps materials development, how to develop materials in Kaaps, whether you want to translate it, because if they want to develop materials in Kaaps, they will need this dictionary and the grammar book to help them along.
Yeah.
And
I just have a question. Won't it be easier then to train community members also, like as to teach, man?
Yeah.
Like to teach in schools as well, man. And then maybe because unless like the first they had experience better, but we do it properly.
No, I completely agree, and I think we need that can be part of the program because if you do that, you increase the effectiveness of the transition, because training is part of the transition and the material development. We have Nathan Nantal, we have all these authors on our local advisory board who write creative works in Kaaps. But that only takes us so far, because everybody, rappers write creatively, rhymes, 16 bars, boom, klar, freestyle battle, right? But when it comes to mathematics and history, you need to know how to teach it through a particular language. Because what you need to do is to develop the cognitive proficiency of the learner, meaning how much can we develop this particular teaching material so that the learner can take up this knowledge in Kaaps and store it in the brain and then give it back to you in a test or some other type of assessment, right? So that's what the basic education department needs to do. Universities, what they need to do is to look at their language policies and see if it's truly reflecting multilingualism. Because what universities are worried about is, look, if we change our language policy, we have to now stick to it because this is in our policy, and then we have to put money to it. Then we have to invest in adapting the curriculum. A case in point is Stellenbosch, for example. This debate of Afrikaans, where the gelijke kanse took Stellenbosch to court. And I think it went up to the Constitutional Court. And Stellenbosch's argument was, look, it's too expensive to expand in the way that, or retract in the way that gelijke kanse wants us to retract into. And Stellenbosch won the case because they made an economics argument saying we can't afford it, right? So that's what the universities need to do. It doesn't cost that much to transform the curriculum or to do the materials development if you work with government. So training will be the most important thing for this language to become a language of teaching and learning.
Also, Shaq, can you just answer the men's on Facebook, man? Or just shout out to Alex Henry for bombing the comment section here.
Shout out to Facebook and my lack of sleep.
Because no that.
Okay, I ga so 'n vraag
Yeah,
vra.
sure.
So say 5 years now, the woordenboek is established.
Yeah.
Is there plans to move on to say Joburg? Because Joburg College is a different dialect.
Yeah, absolutely,
Like
yes.
my pa altijd, my pa is van Kimberley, my ma pa is van Kimberley. And growing up, my pa altijd my gat gemaakt was hoe ik praat, man. In the way
Yeah.
say Afrikaans is, man.
Right.
Will they, because alles allemaal say cow and will the same thing be implemented maybe to empower them as well? Or maybe in Durban there's maybe different dialect of Afrikaans or
Yeah.
You know?
One of the things, and Shaquille mentioned about the targeted plans for the dictionary. One, we will establish a dictionary for children in schools, and that's very important. I mean, I was so touched when Tigerberg Hospital sent me this translated version of a children's stories that Andre Chantal translated into Kaap's called Wurfa Mummy. So when the child is born, the first words the child hears when they read the story is in Kaap's. So that's an extremely important thing to do because the child develops the words already at that early stage before they start babbling, right? The thing that we've learned from Tapelo is that a dictionary for everyone is a dictionary for no one. So what we first have to do is lay the groundwork for Kaap's. If we succeed in this model, and we will, then we can go on to other regional varieties. But those regional varieties of Kaap's can already be taken up in the dictionary, and we can mark it as, let's say, they say awoi, which is a weird contrived version of away, which is probably likely to be somewhere. We can say stylistically, we mark it saying, okay, that word is used in somewhere in Joburg. And we know that is the case because it might be influenced by Nguni languages, you know. Or there's an overuse of so Nguni languages are isiXhosa and isiZulu. Or there might be an overuse of Kanti, which means but. But we also use Kanti, right? Kanti, yeah, right. So we can.
Another word that came to mind was Icona.
Icona, yeah, exactly.
It's also a Nguni word. I thought, like, no, that's a Cape place word. Nah, it's Nguni.
No, but you see, the thing about this is that we know of these words from the Nguni languages because of the number gangs. Right? Die nommer was... Ja, so die nommer was in die vierde geweest, during the 1990s. Maar toe hulle dit buitekant te bring was... Is het maar niet die feit. Because language, you need to understand that language is not outside of us. It's not independent of us. Our movement, our actions, the way we speak, and who we come in contact with, allows us to spread the language, right? So, and that's what happens with the number gangs language, and that's why every Cape Flats laity knows when they hear, jy hoes staan vas. Wat staan sy kapadim op die Jikwan? Right, okay, I'll stop there because I shouldn't go any further. Reveal myself.
No, it makes sense now because, like generally speaking now, Kaap is baie divided.
Right, absolutely.
Like white is wat mense bly daar, wat mense bly daar. Exactly. So our language don't there is but in die tronk.
Ja, oh, yes.
As mos 'n kleiner spaat en so hulle meng meer as obviously kan die language ook nou intertwined. So ek het nogal nooit aan gedink soos daai.
But that's you see that's the thing that many academics, many linguists in my field fail to describe accurately or comprehensively. And that's why Kaap speakers are always, or Afrikaans speakers are always misunderstood. It's just that you are very multilingual. You are very bilingual because you know all of these languages. It's just that you can't use them. Sy kan nie bang gaan kyk jy hoe ek wil iets deposit man.
Oh yeah.
Because people are like
yeah.
You switch to English, right? Your first reaction is like...
I'd like to make it in Paris.
Yeah. Or,
it's a code switch, basically.
Ja, maar jy gaan ook nie sê, kan ek gewoon deposito insit. Unless jy pastoors of vrouwen is. But I'm saying because those contexts have an elevated functional use of Afrikaans, and that's usually the case of standard Afrikaans. Now, the speakers who speak closer to that variety are white Afrikaans speakers because their Afrikaans was selected and standardized. So what do I mean? Standardization is a process where you select one variety and then you codify it into a dictionary and a grammar book and then say, this is the standard. This is the language that we will write in. Yeah. This is the language where we will think in, and this is the language that we will pray in. And I think, but I know in that particular process, you exclude a lot of other particular languages or dialects. So in what we are doing with this particular dictionary is to say, look, the moment we are finished, trust me, the conversation will transform into a different conversation. this idea of Afrikaans being an apartheid language will end, I'm sure, because we are putting an end to it. It might sound too optimistic or too sentimental, but with the process of and we are not talking about standardization, we are just laying the groundwork. So if the community says one day, look, we really need a dictionary, oh, but we have a dictionary. We want a grammar book, we have a grammar book. And so
No, dat is dope.
Wait.
As ek wil net die sê hoe formuleer dit? As jy moet dink aan die werk wat julle nou doen, hè? En ek dink nou sommer aan Reddit die waar hy op die airwaves is.
Ja.
Baie mense sê hy moet nie daar wees nie because of hy is nie.
Ja.
By the way,
You
you
know,
actually
so-
mentioned
so-
the dictionary on his show, no?
So
You actually
he-
mentioned it.
No, that's quite. So he's doing it more on a social level, and you guys are doing it on academical level.
Yeah.
So what is as we fuck doen, it is. I respect you guys for doing for julle altyd. Dit voel
Yeah.
nog als ek
I
vir
don't-
altyd geïnterview
Interview,
vandag.
yeah.
No,
Dat
but,
was dope, dat was
but
dope.
it's so does D have a news segment on his
Yeah, it's in the morning. It's in the morning. Good vibes. Like good
but somebody reading the news like bulletin news.
Ja, he does, yeah.
But
Yeah, he does.
it's in English, right?
It depends Afrikaans. Ek dink soms die switch hulle.
But it's not in carbs, right?
I don't
No.
definitely not.
See, that's you see, if D's in the right space, we need him to be in that space. But if we can sustain that space as an Afrikaans space,
Yeah.
that will give the lighties a clear idea of that my language is used to read the news. And I can actually understand when they talk about Afghanistan, what's happening there or what had happened there, right? And I think that's extremely important. So we need to have that switch, that tipping point, where it's used as a language of teaching and learning. You can think abstractly what is a Pythagoras theorem in carbs. And I'll give you an example. At university level, third years classes have tried to translate the material from English into carbs. So we have this notion where, say for example, you go into a space, a plaza or a shop or a mall, and you meet a couple of friends and a stranger that speaks a different language, but you know that language, you know a little bit of that language, and then you speak full sentences to your one friend in English, less so in to the other friend in carbs, and maybe one or two words like molo or whatever to your other friend that you don't know. We call that you truncate it, meaning you stagger it, right? That's what we call truncated multilingualism that you have. So you make choices when to use it, in full sentences or full paragraphs. So the students translated that term into afgekapte meertaligheid. So that when you see it's like, yeah, it's a biggie afgekap, yeah. See, fully, maar it's a biggie afgekap.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
that's
so
the first attempt, yeah.
One question. So what do you call it when for example, if I speak to a certain like a person from like a different race or whatever, if somebody speaks Xhosa and I'll speak to them in their accent,
Yeah.
in the way they will speak by, like, why do we do that? Then what do you call that?
It's called accommodation. It's in interaction. You are trying to accommodate that particular person, even though you know you don't speak fully isiXhosa. But it's also the way that you do it. Sometimes it can come across as mocking.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And we know comedians, they tread a very fine line when we do that, right?
Fun fact wat hy nog gesê het van comedians, dan is dit een keer gedoen, Trevor. Wat hy gesê het, ou kan nie verstaan want hy sê Trevor nie, Trevor. Toe sê sy sommer, Trevor man. Toe sê, oh Trevor, toe verstaan hy is.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
exactly.
not disrespectful. Sometimes it's not bitter sometimes om
Yeah,
communication
om
te
communication.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And that comes back to the idea that language is a system of signs. Those signs are verbal and non-verbal. Because you could say molo, but your face is full of smiles, which means you're condescending, right?
Yeah.
And so you use the verbal and supplement it with a sarcastic or condescending look. And that's why I think carbs and Afrikaans is always under in a reinvention. Like we reinvent the language with our body and with the way that we say particular words. Like the word, what's the example that we had? Chais, right?
Yeah.
There are so many ways to write chais, but and it has one meaning and a different meaning. I think we had 2 or 3 senses. Right?
And then also obviously the the gangsterism,
the gangster-
gangsterization of the word.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, that is extremely.
Sorry to
interesting.
break the word.
no.
Isn't size just get? Ik gaat voor jou size, I'm gonna get you.
Ja.
Als je kan wil size, gaat kan krijgen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
Those are the So those are the meanings that we came to, right? And I think you have two. We also came up with two. But if we dig deeper, we might find 4, 5, 6, 7 ways of 7 meanings of size, right? And I think that if we capture that, it's an accurate reflection of the way we use the language, right? So I think that's, for me, I think as a linguist interested in words, that's extremely important. Yeah.
Just before we wrap up, I just want to answer the people that have been posing questions on Facebook. And
Ik heb die geld in een zin van.
no. What I think the guy Alex was alluding to was he asked like sal die woord cookie ingesit word. All words will be included,
Yeah.
including rude or pejorative words, but we will indicate whether those
Style
words,
marker.
with the style marker, whether this word is extremely offensive or is prosecutable by law.
Yeah.
For instance, the K word, because it's not indicated in Zahatia,
Yeah,
that it
yes.
is an extremely offensive word and that it is prosecutable by law. So, but then for the sake of having everything out there, because we don't want to exclude, it's like when we are going to put in our way, we're going to put in all 3 or 4 versions of our way.
Yeah.
When we put in choice, we're going to put in all the different spellings, but the one will have the full meaning in Kaaps, standard Afrikaans, standard English, and then the others might just refer to C number 1.
Yeah.
So we'll have the words there, but in C1 will give you the full explanation.
This is a very important topic that is being raised because the Ha'atia is a prescriptive dictionary. It tells you this is how you have to write it, right? In our case, we will produce a descriptive dictionary. In other words, we will give you the very ways of how you can write ani and our way. And we're doing it that way because we are not at the stage yet where CAPS is used as the language of teaching and learning, right? Once we reach that stage, then it's up to us as a community to agree, okay, so watter woord gebruik ons nou vir die sin, for example. And the other aspect of this is also the pejorative words. In the Ha'atia, if you have the 6th edition on page 567, I think, they have the K word with a footnote that doesn't explain really the pejorative meaning. It's like really whitewashing the word. And then on the next page, they have the word kafir, which is the root word from where it comes from, right?
And Adam actually said it's gafir, no?
Yeah, yes. Yeah. So that tells you already that they've deliberately made a distinction between that two.
Yeah.
But they should have said that put a note there that it's a pejorative word. Because we live in a society where nobody wants to be called a K word, even though the word is used, but you have a responsibility as a dictionary maker to make it clear to the public, look, this is a swear word. Because the kid who picks it up tomorrow will say like, okay, that's the meaning.
Yeah, it
So-
doesn't
so-
know the...
Is it okay to use it? Yeah, I'm sure, because the dictionary says it.
Yeah.
Like I have experienced that in one of the schools that we worked in, and then I asked the guy like, "Yo, what happened to your forward?" Because there was a huge dangas, and so he said, he said, "No, it's the K is that threw me with the dangas," and like, "Yo, bruh,
Nou,
why
met
do you
skills
say-"
wel uit.
Yeah, but we
School is
zit hem uitgeschaald because like, and so that probably comes from the parents, man.
Yeah.
The money pass misschien ook qua, nou zie je, alert it in een.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, as a dictionary maker, you have a responsibility and to society, and that's why we are trying to change the conversation. Now, one important part of it, and we had a discussion about it yesterday, I think, no, Friday, is developing scholarship on how to make a dictionary like the CAPS dictionary. To have a conversation with other dictionary makers saying, look, we are making it different, and this is the process that we are following.
I
Because
see.
there's no body of knowledge, and now we are also having, to create a body of knowledge. So, Mora Sakila, published author and lexicons, the journal
Lexicography.
for lexicography. Wie is this Sakila and Hilde? Hoe goed is
Oh, wait.
Yeah, but
Check
there's
it.
one point one last point is I want to make. This, and I want to end on this saying this will change lives.
Yes.
And here's one example somebody who stands in front of the magistrate tomorrow, and the magistrate doesn't understand what that particular Kaap's word means, and the dictionary will help to bring context to those words. And it has happened before. Tapelo made an example. He was called into court by the lawyers and the magistrate to explain what the meaning of this word is. Yeah, it's in the dictionary. And he explained the process. So it will transform and impact lives significantly. Yeah.
Okay, so with that being said, Mensa, short for hanging with us today.
Yeah.
Check out the dictionary, the webpage on dwcaps.co.za.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you,
Thank you, Nantal.
Professor,
Yeah.
for coming out.
Happy to be here.
I just want to say those that said I was the Kak podcast, in your face. Was it Professor's Oposa podcast? Was it daar now?
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. But anyway, thank you for. This is definitely one of those ones I'm going to remember.
Yeah, I'm happy to come again and we can
Yeah,
talk
we
about
need to
the
have a
word.
part
two. We need to have a
We need to have a part two.
With Adam this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was thinking of that,
exactly. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
thanks for doing this.
Thank
Thanks for tuning in, guys.
Away, so Babbling Heads, we out.
See you.
Away.
Peace.
Bye.
Duidelijk.
Good biscuit.
Yeah, it's fun. Thanks.
The Babbling Heads podcast.